I'm finally back with another pitch video, but more of just talking about another live-action remake. Hello everybody, welcome back to Pitch This here on the MrEliMac channel. I'm your host, MrEliMac, and today we're going to be going back into the Disney live-action remake sphere. Last time I did this, I talked about Atlantis, The Lost Empire, and now I'm going to be talking about another one of my favorite Disney animated movies that I think would benefit to have a Disney live-action remake, which is The Black Cauldron. Now, The Black Cauldron, for anyone that doesn't know, is a movie that came out in the mid to late 80s for Disney and wasn't that much of a popular film for them. In fact, it was one of their, I want to say, lowest grossing, maybe not lowest grossing, but I know a lot of people were not major fans of it. I, however, grew up with the movie. Like, when I was a kid, that was one of the VHSs that we had, and I remember just watching that movie as many times as possible. And it was supposed to be one of Disney's darker movies. And it was supposed to be one of Disney's darker movies when it came out in the 80s. And very much, I never saw that when I was a kid. I just looked at all the fantasy elements that were in it and just thought it was such a great movie that Disney had made. But it wasn't until later when I started to realize that a lot of people didn't like that movie. And so, with that in mind, I very much think to myself that I believe that The Black Cauldron would very much work for a Disney live-action remake. Before I get into the actual pitch, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Also hit the notification bell, that way you can be notified whenever a new Pitch This video goes your way. But with all that out of the way, let's get into what I would do for the live-action remake of The Black Cauldron. And so, let me give a little bit more backstory on it. The Black Cauldron is actually a novel in the series known as The Chronicles of Prydain, and it's sort of the main setting of the Black Cauldron story, Prydain. And it follows the character of Taran, who is, in the animated film, is a assistant pig keeper, and he goes with his, tries to save his pig who was kidnapped by the Horned King, who is the big bad of the movie. And he meets with a princess and a bard, and then as time goes on, he meets with a little creature named Gurgi. They never actually specify what sort of creature Gurgi is, it's just a creature. And then he meets with fairies, he meets with three witches, and then we continue on to the ending where the Horned King gets the Black Cauldron and brings about the army of the dead. And then it takes Gurgi sacrificing himself to really defeat the army of the dead. And the reason why Gurgi sacrifices himself and the reason why the army of dead goes away is because Gurgi doesn't think he has any friends, so he sacrifices himself because he's a pure soul. The army of the dead goes away. Or at least that's what I'm assuming is the reason why the army of the dead dies again. And then the Horned King grabs onto the cauldron and he goes away as well. So that's sort of the basic plot of The Black Cauldron, and I think something that could be great for the live action remake if you add a little bit more backstory on what has happened in Prydain at this point. So let's say there is some backstory that we were missing in the animated film that could have explained more of the rich history of this world and this universe that we are in. Maybe add a little bit more backstory, maybe not at the very beginning, but sort of throughout the film as it's going on, we get more backstory. Because one of the main things in the movie is that Taran has a magical sword, but sort of it's just, here's a magical sword and there's not really much explaining after that. Maybe we start learning more about the magical sword in the film and sort of the history behind how the Horned King was able to get the magical sword. Also, I think it would be interesting, maybe not do a full backstory on the Horned King, but sort of get an idea of who the Horned King is and learn more about the Horned King. Another thing that I think would be great for a live-action remake is Princess Eilonwy, or Eilonwy. One of those two, but she's sort of the princess that Taran meets, and we don't really get much of an explanation on her, except that she has an orb that can float around and can talk to her, and that's it. And she's a princess. Who is she? Who's her dad? Who's the king? It's unknown. We don't really know a lot of backstory on her, except that she's a princess that is in the dungeon of the Horned King. That's it. I think a little bit more explanation on her character would be very much appreciated, and I think very much needed for this live action remake. Fluter who is the bard in the film. We don't need a lot of information on him. He is very much the comic relief character in the film, so you can sort of keep him the way he is, but maybe make him like have more to do with it. Have him do more. And that's mainly it. That's really all I was trying to best say out loud. Another thing is Gurgi. The character is a small character, sort of like the size of a gremlin. And he sort of speaks with a voice like this. Gurgi has no friends. He sort of speaks like that. And that sort of, when I was a kid, though I loved him very much as a kid back then, I feel like now when I look back at that character as I'm older, I feel like he takes a little bit away. You can tell very much that is the character that kids are supposed to like and attach to. I feel like maybe changing it, making the character a bit more serious while also having the kid flair, the way kids can like focus on that character, I think that would work as well. And again, fully make the Horned King. He is a terrifying character already in the animated film. Make him even more terrifying. Like, have the design of the Horned King be different, but also similar. And also have an actor who would play that role have an intimidating presence to where you hear the voice and you see him walk in and you're already like, okay, I'm terrified of this guy. Because in the animated movie, John Hurt actually did the voice of the Horned King. And when you hear the Horned King in the animated movie, you can tell like, oh, this is serious. He's a terrifying figure. And you continue that in the live action movie. I think very much what I would do with the Black Cauldron in a live action remake is don't be afraid to lean into the darker side of this story. I mean, because this is a dark story. I think that the animated movie was just PG, which is sort of not common in animated movies at that time, but I think for this one, you make it a PG-13 movie. You try to keep it where there are adult themes in it, and there is stuff that maybe younger children may not be able to really relate to and maybe be too afraid to watch it, but also make it to where you can have someone who's at least a teenager watch and be like, alright, this is pretty cool. I think we need more action scenes in the movie because there wasn't a lot of action scenes in the actual animated movie, and I think that would flesh it out a bit more. And I think the fairies in the movie could also still be in the live action one, but I think maybe have explain more of what the fairies are and what their deal is. I think that's really what I'm mainly saying for this live action remake, is just explain more of the world. Let us be engrossed in this world. And I really loved the three witches in the Black Cauldron. They're very much the explainers and the people that give the exposition of what the Black Cauldron is, and only mainly the Black Cauldron. I feel like they can continue to be that exposition type characters and the people that give the exposition for the story, but I feel like they could explain more about the Black Cauldron. Maybe even they may have insight on what the sword is, and because in the animated movie, they're very entranced by the magical sword, and they're like, oh, we'll give you the Black Cauldron, you just gotta give us the sword, that's all we're wanting. And they never explain why they want the sword. It's just a thing of magic and something that was good. They're like, oh, we want that. Maybe if they can explain what the sword is in the live action remake, maybe that will help people along. Again, don't be afraid to lean into the darkness of the story, and maybe if this movie is successful, if Disney looks at the Black Cauldron live action remake and they see that it's successful, you can continue that story, because again, this is a book series as well, so you can do a sequel to the Black Cauldron and base it off of the follow-up book and just keep on going and going, because I I did some research on this, I think that the Horned King isn't the big bad of the Chronicles of Prydain story. I think he's more of the Sauron of the Black Cauldron, and he's not really the Sauron. So maybe we can even hint at the bigger bad in this one if they want to continue on making this their sort of franchise outside of Marvel and Star Wars. This is just an idea that I'm suggesting. But yeah, I think that the Black Cauldron needs to lean more into the darkness, or again, not fully go into it, but not be afraid to embrace it and expand upon the world, give us some explanations on more about what the sword was, the magic sword, explain more of the Black Cauldron, explain more of Princess Eilonwen, because, again, they just introduce her as she's a princess that's in the dungeon. Not really much else, and she has an orb that can float, and she can talk to it, and that understands her, and that's really it. Maybe, like, tell us who her father is, tell us the backstory of how she's in the dungeon, like, give us more explanation on her character besides, here's the princess, she got captured and was brought into the dungeon, but there's no rhyme or reason why. I think maybe adding that explanation would really help with the story and get us more invested in her character. And don't make Tyron, because there are moments in the actual animated film where Tyron feels like a whiny kid. Like, try to find moments where we don't have to have Tyron be the whiny kid. Make him have moments where it can be like that, but not that's his character. Make it to where he can actually be more of a heroic character. Someone like, you look at Luke Skywalker, and how there are moments where he was a bit whiny, but he was able to eventually, by the end of the original trilogy, he was a hero character. And try to do that with Tyron. I feel like for Tyron, Luke Skywalker in the original trilogy is very much a good basis to try to base the character on. But yeah, that's mainly it. That's really all I have for the Black Cauldron live-action remake. If there is anything I missed that you think would work for the Black Cauldron live-action remake, post them in the comments down below, because I really think that the Black Cauldron could really be a great live-action remake. I'm only going to do one more Disney live-action remake to really end out January, and then in February I'm going to try to do some other stories that aren't just me trying to tell you what I would add to the live-action remake of this Disney film. But yeah, what were your thoughts on this pitch? Did you like it? Did you hate it? Were you indifferent to it? Whatever your thoughts, post them in the comments down below. Also, again, if you have your own thoughts on what you would add to the Black Cauldron live-action remake, post them in the comments down below as well. Also, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. I want to try to get to 100 subscribers by the end of the year. That's the big hope. 100 at the end of the year. Also, hit the notification bell, that way you can be notified whenever a new pitch video like this comes your way. But until next time, I've been Mr. EliMac, you've been the audience, and I hope you all have a great rest of the day.